I would like to call to order the, oh, I'm sorry, we have to turn on the recorder. All right, now we're ready. I'd like to call to order the Nashua Board of Education Budget Committee meeting, Wednesday, March 20th, 2019 at 6:30 p.m. at the Nashua High School North Boardroom. I'm going to take the roll call. Mrs. Oden?
Here.
Ms. Raymond?
Here.
Mr. Kaufman? Here. Mr. Mosher?
I'm here.
Mr. Mosher is joining us by telephone as he recuperates at home. Are you by yourself, Mr. Mosher?
I certainly am.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Van Twyver?
Present.
Mr. Garino is here. Ms. Hohensee?
Here.
Ms. Timmons?
Here.
Ms. Porter?
Here.
Also in attendance, Dr. Mosley, Dr. McKinney, Mr. Donovan. We also have joining us tonight Kim Kleiner and Mayor Donchis. We have two items on our agenda. One is our meeting with the mayor, and the other is our deliberation on our budget. So I'd like to ask Mayor Donchis if he'd like to come up and say a few words. Okay. Okay. Also with us is Marsha Bagley, I'm sorry, Special Ed Director.
Should I begin?
Go ahead.
All right.
Sir, you have the floor, Mr. Mayor.
Well, thank you for having me. As usual, I enjoy coming to talk with the Board of Ed. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and all the members of the board. I think the idea was for me to come in and talk about the budget as I've proposed it, maybe the reasons and background for that, and what I hope to accomplish with respect to our kids and education in Nashua. So our goal, my goal, I'm sure yours, is to offer excellent education for every child at every level, every day. And that requires the dedication of staff, of our teachers, and of course, the dedication of our school board members and City Hall in the form of moral and, yes, financial support. Now, over the last few years, I think we've accomplished a lot in terms of educational quality in Nashua. We extended our full-day kindergarten from half-day to full-day for all students. To me, a big step forward. We successfully negotiated a 4-year teacher's contract, which accomplishes, I believe, the goal of helping to retain quality teachers, particularly in the mid-career years where we were suffering losses as a result of people leaving the district and going elsewhere. We, I think, have, over several years, we have not lost any positions. We've never, and we are no longer in the era where how many positions are we going to cut this year? We were able to save Project Clearway, which was eliminated, at least by proposal, in one of the budgets proposed by the previous superintendent. And now I'm committed, and I think you're committed, and I believe the Board of Aldermen will be committed to undertaking an ambitious middle school improvement project across all the middle schools, which will include either remodeling the Elm Street Middle School or potentially building a replacement school in the southwest part of the city, and will also include improvement, capital improvements, physical improvements at the other two middle schools, those being, of course, Fairgrounds and Pennachuck, potentially to even out some of the population. So the third school, Elm Street, or its replacement doesn't have as large a population as compared with the other schools, and to bring physical improvements to the other schools as well, get rid of the portables and things like that. I've said that I support an ambitious schedule for that project, which would result in it being open in the fall of 2023. 4 years from this fall, which, talking with Rick Dowd, head of the Joint Special School Building Committee, I believe that can be accomplished. And I think you're all familiar with the status of that project at the current time. So the budget that I proposed for this year, and I guess I need to say that usually, at least in my experience, the improvement of education is a long-term process, and you try to move forward, take steps forward every year, year by year. But because we're involved with in New Hampshire, where property taxes are very high and there is a very over-reliance on property taxes, we have to be very careful about the tax rate and whether the people who live in the city can afford the taxes that they have. So to that end, we need, in my view, to propose a budget every year that results in a tax rate that people can live with. And in this case, I define that as being a tax rate that's no higher than 3% for this year. Now that takes into account that we have a huge increase in one large fixed cost this year, which is across all of our departments. The cost of health insurance for employees is going up by 11%, or $3 million. Now that is a huge hit for the city. We are self-insured. We save money by being self-insured. We don't pay premiums. We pay an administrator to take care of the administration of the benefits. But and so this is based on projection, but it's a projection of what the cost will be given our experience in the current year. And we have healthcare consultants who advise us as to how to project and help us to make projections and to determine, and they've been pretty accurate as to what future costs are going to be. So health insurance costs are up $3 million, which is by itself a 1.5% tax increase. So and most of that is, even though nobody sees it in terms of educational quality and the teachers don't see it in their paychecks, it is an increase mostly for education, in the sense that most city employees work for the school department. So we are putting a lot of money towards that. In the context of the factors that I've mentioned, I asked all departments, all the large departments, to submit budgets of no more than 2.25%. Now, most of the city hall departments, they have a lower threshold and they reached a lower number. But for schools, fire, police, I asked for 2.25%. Now, of course, when you look at the school department, and I know that you have a lot of needs. There are the ELL, the shortage of ELL positions. There are the paras, lack of paras or sufficient number of paras for the kindergarten classrooms. There's the need, given the opioid crisis and a lot of other things, a lot of social problems for school psychologists. I understand that those things we need to work to achieve. So I gave you a 2.25% budget, which I think at least leaves things, certainly keeps us where we are, and maybe would help a little bit towards some of these problems. But because you all, and members of the teaching staff, Dr. Mosley and others, have pointed out very clearly the very significant shortage of ELL teachers, in addition to the 2.25%, you persuaded me to add $200,000, and I put this in a contingency account, which can be simply transferred. If the budget passed as proposed, the alderman could simply transfer it to you for that purpose. I put $200,000 into the city contingency account for designated ELL teachers, which I believe would accomplish 4 new ELL teachers, those that you've said you would like to add this year. You'd like to add more, but that's at least what you think you need as a minimum. It does not accomplish all the other goals that you have, worthy goals, but within the context of the budget issues that I've mentioned, especially the $3 million, in the context of trying to keep the tax rate to no more than 3%, I think that's the best we can do this year for education. The fire and police departments have other problems, and they're being limited as well. And so you are not the only department that is not going to get, or at least as I propose the budget, is not getting everything that you think, and maybe justifiably, would, should be done. Now,
Thank you.
of course, I'm always available for criticism. I expect there might be some, or questions, or whatever you think is appropriate.
So you don't mind taking questions from?
No, of course not.
Okay. So I'm going to go to Mr. Mosher first to see if Mr. Mosher has any questions or comments.
Well, my comment is that being aware of the needs of the district, I think that it's imperative that we do our diligence and try to keep within the constraints that the mayor has mentioned, and do the best we can. Of course, there are some things that we really need very badly, and we'll just have to do the best we can.
Thank you, Mr. Mosher. Does anyone else have any questions or comments for our mayor? Mr. Kaufman, and then Dr. Mosley wanted to say something. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to say thank you for your understanding and your sharing of the grant writer position and your contingency on the ELL. It is an urgency that we feel, and I think you worked something out in the middle. But I do want to ask a question, kind of reflecting what Alderman Dowd said last week, that the $200,000 was in a contingency fund, but here it's proposed that it's for ELL teachers. What he said to us last week, that it could be used for other positions as well. In other words, we had to hire people, number one, but it could also be used for ELL positions and some other things. Honestly, I don't recall what they were. The psychologists. So is that your understanding, or is it exclusively what's been presented to the board? Is it what it says here is there for ELL positions? Is it your understanding it's exclusive ELL, or is it for other purposes?
Well, as designated or as labeled right now, there's $200,000 for contingency, and it's designated for ELL just because I thought that seemed to be the most critical need. Now, the point is to get $200,000 to the school department for maybe ELL. Of course, it's up to, ultimately, now that I've proposed the budget, the Board of Aldermen either now, when they pass the budget, or afterwards, to transfer it to the school department, which I'm confident that they will do. And, if you made a good case, well, we would prefer to use it for 2 psychologists and 2 ELL or some other combination. I think that probably people would go along with that. But I just designated it as ELL just because it seemed like that was the most critical need. But of course, you're here. Once the money goes to you, of course, you can use it for whatever you want. But hopefully, there could at least be a discussion as to what the money would be used for. But the board's judgment as to how the money could be spent most effectively, of course, would ultimately be very important. But on that other point, Mr. Kaufman, that you raised, I should have mentioned that. Yes, Dr. Mosley has mentioned that you don't have a grant writer, neither does the city. We think that together we could bring in more grant money if we were to have someone dedicated to that purpose. So Dr. Mosley suggested, well, what if the school department puts in half the money and the city puts in half the money, and then we have this person work, across the community to bring in whatever they can wherever, for schools, for playgrounds, for public health, whatever it is. And I said that's a good idea. So in the budget, I did include half the money for the grant writer, which hopefully we can work together to employ effectively.
Thank you
Dr.
very
Mosley,
much.
Dr. Mosley, you had your hand up. Did you want to add something? Also, okay, sure. Ms. Raymond and then Mrs. Oden.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank you so much for coming and sharing the broader perspective on the budget. I think it's easy for us to get in our own lane and not pay attention to the rest of it. And, we've had discussions already, you and I, about what the district needs. And I'm sure you've been watching our fun meetings where we talk about all of our needs. So
Yes.
thank you for coming.
Mrs. Oden?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Johnchus, for coming. And I understand the position you're in. I think everybody in this room, just about everybody in this room, pays taxes in Nashua. But I am concerned. Both of our high schools have recently gone through the NEAS committee, which is the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, and both principals put a presentation together for the visiting committee. And they were comparing what's going on in a time frame of 10 to 12 years. And in 2008, the cost per pupil in Nashua was $8,459.55. The state average was $10,876.72. We were 20.3% below the state average. 2018, we are now 22.6% below the state average. We're losing ground. As our needs multiply, our resources are dwindling. And you mentioned the dedication of our teaching staff, of all of our staff. They mentioned that also. And some of their recommendations had to do a lot with the budget, items that had to have budget support. And they made a comment in there that as hard as our teachers are working, that's why we're doing so well, but they need more support, PD. The students qualifying for free and reduced lunch, 2008, North had 27% of students receiving free lunch. They are qualifying for free and reduced lunch. They now have 40% of their students, a 13% increase. South has had, since 2006 to 2018, a 40% increase. 35% of their students are eligible for free and reduced lunch. The ELL students has just ballooned. I believe they asked for 9 ELL teachers, and there's administration proposed 4. We're not meeting the needs of all our students, and I haven't even mentioned para-support. And the thing about para-support is there are legal documents that we have to meet, or we could be involved in a lawsuit. And because we have a lack of subs, and that's a problem all over the state, we are taking subs to try to cover classrooms. And when you do that, IEPs are not met. So that is one of my concerns that...
Could you speak in your microphone? We're getting waved by the booth.
As the Board of Education, I feel it's our job to advocate for our needs, all of our needs. And some of these needs are extremely critical. It's just not ELL, and that has been a need for a while. The program is growing. The teachers are working so hard. I went to Elm Street when they had an ELL night last year. They had pizza and books. Families came, and they were so involved. I was really impressed with our ELL families, their support for the program, for their students. I was looking at the books the kids were picking up. They had a variety. We need to keep this going. We have to make progress with them, but we have other needs. Plus, you mentioned the opioid crisis. That is affecting so many of our families. And you know, we have safe stations for the adults that are dealing with the opioid crisis. We don't have enough psychologists to support these kids that come from families with the opioid crisis. So I think I would not be doing my job if I did not advocate and let people know the real needs of the school district, because they are growing and they are needs that are critical to the success of students. Thank you.
Well, I think it's good you're doing that. Just going back to the beginning, what did they say the average per pupil expenditures? We get for 2008, it was 8,000 something, and what is it?
Nashua was $8,459.55, and in 2018, in 10 years, we've gone up to $12,021.61. But percentage-wise, we've fallen almost 3 points below the state average.
Does anyone else have any comments or questions for Mayor Donchis? I want to thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know that not just the mayor's office, but the aldermen at City Hall they understand our needs, and they have been in the past concerned about meeting our needs. And there's a balance that they have to make, because they got to try to meet the needs of not just the school department, but police and fire and all the other services. So it's not an easy job that we have, that City Hall has. But I want to thank you for all the consideration, because I know you are very concerned about the school department. So.
Well, Mr. Chair, anytime you would like me to come back, talk about anything, please let me know. I'd be glad to.
Okay.
All right.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Could I jump in for 1 minute?
Sure. Go ahead, Mr. Mosher.
Yeah, I listened to Dottie, and she is correct in what she says. But one of the other things that popped into my mind, which I neglected to say before, is the tremendous cost of our out-of-district students, which is mandated, and we have to take care of these kids, but it costs us a vast amount of money to do it. And I'd like to know if there was some way that we could reduce this and get the programs in-house so that we do not have to send these kids out for the special things, unless they're, of course, court mandated. So I think that's one of the other things that the mayor and Ms. Kleiner can think about and maybe come up with a solution somewhere.
Thank you, Mr. Mosher. Go ahead, Ms. Raymond.
Thank you, Mr. Guarino. I just wanted to point out regarding out-of-district costs that I believe Dr. Mosley is having some thoughts on that. I believe you were talking to Manchester about some future options to help reduce our out-of-district costs, but not in this budget.
Actually, I just wanted to say that we actually took it's in contracted services, and so we had this discussion about out-of-district costs probably when I first arrived. And so, again, I just want to thank Mayor Donchis for his words, but we also, the mayor and I, with Kim in the office, in my office, and also downtown, we also talked about some collaboration around exploring what would be called a collaborative. So in this budget that we have in contracted services, I think we budget, what, $20,000, Dan, is that correct? $15,000 to have someone work on a contracted service contract to start engaging in these discussions with not just with the Manchester, but perhaps with other districts who are interested. I also had some discussions with the Manchester superintendent, and there was an interest there. So certainly we're looking to embark on that. The outer district, Mr. Mosier, you are correct. The outer district cost has plagued our district for some time. So we did have to make adjustments in this particular budget to cover to be strong in that area. And this is a very fluid situation in a sense that we don't know what kids are going to be coming into our district that need out-of-district placement, as well as kids who are also transitioning out. And I know I have Marsha here, who can certainly attest to that, that's always a challenge in terms of finding the right balance and location. The other piece to this that has not been talked about, but we have no control over, is the out-of-district tuition. We have no control over that, and it's we are subject to the out-of-district placement adjustments. So if sometimes they'll go up 2%, and in some cases they go up 5%. They are going up as of this year, and so we still have to make those adjustments as well. So we have embarked on that. That's right, Ms. Raymond. We have started to explore that. But even if we cut that down in half, we're looking at about, I'd say, $3 million, which would be very, very helpful. So that's going to take a long-term project that does require some financial commitment. What it looks like is that we may need to put up some, I'm just making up a number, it's not in the budget, so don't get nervous or anything like that, but we may need to put up a substantial amount of money to begin with to save some money on the back end. So just keep that in mind. We'll have a better idea next year when we start to embark on that, but certainly that would help significantly.
Thank you, Dr. Mosley. Mr. Kaufman.
Thank you. I know in the 3 years that I've been on the board, we've been talking about how do we make Nashua a destination for other districts for their out-of-district placements. And sometimes we've talked about, well, if let's say you do build a new middle school, maybe part of Elm Street could be redirected, repurposed, probably a better word, for special education or some of the needs of these out-of-placements, where we would, like Dr. Mosley is saying, invest in staff to accommodate our own students and therefore become a destination. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I hope personally that this is going to be addressed in the strategic plan and not just limited to a budget discussion next year. This has been on the plate for a while. We have capacity at Brentwood where we could accommodate maybe a half a dozen students. And I keep asking, are we making any progress to bring in additional students that would require one staff person? But that revenue would substantially offset whatever the cost of that would be. And I was going to say it's about 5.6 million is that right, Mr. Donovan? Our expected run rate this year is 5.6?
Probably about 5.9 to 6.
Oh, okay. Always goes up each time we talk to Mr. Donovan. So, and Dr. Mosley's point, if you gave us half, that would still be 3 million. So it's a big chunk. But I would agree that it's worth investing to create Nashua as a destination in the future, and maybe Elm Street might be a way to help that out with a lot of other things. You could put kindergarten in there or preschool in there or whatever. That building has a lot of wings attached, literally. It's a big building. And it could accommodate smaller classes, which is a reason why we have to build a middle school, right? So smaller populations in these kinds of classes. I'll stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you all.
You're welcome to come back anytime.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Have a good night.
Okay. Our other item on our agenda tonight is the budget. I'm going to give the floor to Mr. Donovan, unless Dr. Mosley has anything, introductions.
That's fine.
Turn it over to Mr. Donovan. I'm going to turn down the lights for his display a little bit too. So, Mr. Donovan, you have the floor.
Okay, first I just want to run through, hopefully, the last handouts that I gave you tonight, just so you have a full budget book. So the first one is our final table of contents. The second one is there were a number of questions that were asked during the budget thing about summer school costs, Brentwood capacity, co-curricular costs, Gen Yes, special ed program. So all that information is in this package. So hopefully that answers all the questions. Also, the next couple of sheets are what we'll call the budget analyses. Now, there were two of them, one of which I sent to the board about a week ago, which was basically kind of breaking down, assuming a 2.92 budget, which was the original version, the items that we'd so-called required and other items which are, let's say, optional or additional. And then also on there is the sheet that we used, which is the 2.43 budget, the sheet that we used when we presented at the public hearing last week. So all that's here. And then the last item, which is number 13D, this is the Title I grant. I had given a number of the other grants previously, and the Title I grant didn't make the copy last time, so here is the details on the Title I grant for the last 2 years. Okay, and I guess, as we turn it over to the board, I just want to explain that on this sheet, what we're starting with is the 112,015,068, which is the 2.43 budget that we shared at the public hearing. So basically, if you go back to those sheets we just discussed, the analyses, you can see those are the items that are in there. So that's where we are. I have left these other two items in the budget since 2 weeks ago. The board did approve this addition to the budget. So assuming those items stay, currently we're at a 2.64% budget, or $112,240,000. So that's really all I have to say. Now we can turn it over to you, the board, and
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. Okay, so does anyone have any, Ms. Raymond?
Thank you. I have a question. After our last meeting, which was the public hearing, it came to my attention that we didn't have an American Sign Language interpreter in the most recent proposed budget, this one, the 2.43. And I had spoken offline, I think I emailed you and Dr. Mosley about that, because my understanding is we need it to prevent out-of-district placements. Is that in there now? What happened?
that is still, it's not in the 112,015 number at this
Okay.
point. If you would like to, you have to make a motion to add it if you'd like. At this point, it's not in there.
Dan, if I can interject real quick.
Sure.
Thank you, Heather, for bringing that up. We had that, once we received that email, we did some research on that, and there's an opportunity for us to use IDEA money, which is a grant, to defray the cost of that, or to pay for the whole cost. The other piece to it as well is that, let's just say the mayor came in and it's the 2.43 budget. And that's all this board decides to move forward. We can certainly include that. I use the word shaving, but it's kind of a way where, we can reallocate certain budget line items. Like, I'll just use, for instance, the New Hampshire School Board Association, right? That we have budgeted for $10,000 there. But if the board doesn't act on it until January, after the elections, there could be $5,000 there to add to that budget line item, or we can use the IDA grant. So it's not going to break the budget. $40,000 out of a $110 million budget is not that significant, but it all is contingent on where this board goes tonight in terms of adding and subtracting line items.
Okay, so hypothetically, if we approved this budget or some other permutation of a budget that fits within this amount, and we then didn't get the IDA grant money the way we expected, would then the next step be that Mr. Donovan would present some options at a finance committee about transferring money? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, that would be, I think the first option would be to look at the IDEA grant. We will get the IDEA grant. We're actually, Marcia and I are headed up to Concord tomorrow to find out more details about it, but that grant is about $3 million a year. That's not going to disappear.
Okay. Thank you.
Mrs. Oden?
Yeah, I guess looking at the IDEA grant, have we spent everything out of that this year? Or the last grant that we received, have we used all of the funds?
Well, we haven't used them all because the year hasn't ended yet. Keep in mind, when you put a grant together, it's a budget, and it's very specific about the items you put in. If we have a person in there and we expect them to have a family health plan and then they only have a single health plan, then there'd be a little bit money left. But there's a woman, Alessa Cunningham, who works for Marcia, who does a wonderful job of tracking it. So we spend most of those dollars on an annual basis.
We're still finishing up with the 16-17 IDEA grant funds right now, and those have all been allocated as of today. We submitted today. And so now we'll move on to the 17-18.
Oh.
And I know I saw something from the state, and Nashua was one of the districts that spent most of the grants that they received. So I think we're doing a good job. I guess I'd like to know what might not be covered in the IDEA grant if we take that money and put it toward the sign language interpreter.
It's a good question. That's part of the whole budgeting of the IDEA grant, which won't be done until later on in the year. So there's always a little bit of, the operating budget is forced to be done first. The grants come later. But it's a $3 million grant. It's $40,000. You know, that's a small percent of the total thing. What would come out? I don't know. Maybe equipment, maybe. Until you really sit down and dig through the details, that's a difficult question to answer.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Van Twyver and then Ms. Hohensee?
Yeah, I watched the proceedings of the last budget meeting, and I was a little confused of where we stand right now. Are we still working on the superintendent's budget, or has this board accepted that and it's now the board's budget?
We have not made a motion to accept a budget yet. So I know there was a motion in the past, but we had not at that point accepted the budget from the superintendent to work on it. So we need to do that this evening.
Thank you.
Ms. Hohensee?
I'll move to accept the 2.43 budget from the administration.
Second.
Is there any questions or comments on the motion? Okay.
Mr. Kaufman.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, just let it go.
Did you?
Then you make your motions. You just accept it. You just accept the 2.43 budget, we vote to accept it, and then we start on our line items, adding and subtracting. So this is just placing it on the work table.
Who seconded that? Ms. Raymond, okay. Okay, on the motion to accept the 2.43% budget, Mrs. Oden?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver?
Yes?
Mr. Guarino votes yes. Ms. Hohensee?
Yes?
Ms. Timmons?
Yes.
Ms. Porter?
Yes.
So we have accepted the 2.43% budget.
May I make a motion?
Sure.
I'd like to move to remove the $10,000 from the New Hampshire School Board Association, and if I get a second, I'd like to speak to it.
Second.
Thank you. Not only does it make that money available, as the superintendent said, but as I've mentioned in the past, this is a lobbying group, and we don't always agree with what they're lobbying for. For example, House Bill 101 that this board voted 5-4 to support and sent a letter to Concord. The New Hampshire School Board Association testified against that bill. So that, their lobbyist testified against the majority of this board. So it was House Bill 101. They also testified against House Bill 564, which was another firearms bill for school districts. So it's not just me, that some things they testify for are not going to be what you want. So why are we supporting something that goes against where we stand? So I recommend that we take the 10,000 out of the budget. We haven't had membership in them for the last 3 years, and we've managed quite well.
Ms. Oden?
Yes, I'm not going to support this. I have listened to Ms. Van Twyver advocate for us being part of this New Hampshire School Boards Association, and it had to do with policy. And after going to several policy meetings, seeing the time we have spent at meetings about policy and wordsmithing, I see the value in this. And we are so behind with our policies that I think it's probably a wise investment that this school district would benefit from, and the board. Thank you.
Mr. Mosher, do you have any comments?
Yes, I would not support this either, because I know the benefits that we get from the School Boards Association, and I am not willing to withdraw from that. And with the help and advice in the policies and anything else that they have asked to do. And over the years, we have always had good results with anything that we had questions we might have had, and we put to the School Boards Association. So, no, I would not support it.
Thank you, Mr. Mosher. Mr. Kaufman?
I am in support of this motion. Not to repeat what Ms. Hohensee said, but she did allude to the fact that it is a lobbying organization. There is a state law, RSA 15.5, which requires that you cannot use state funds to pay for lobbying. So I had asked Mr. Donovan about that. Can he assure us that this money looks like it's coming out of the general fund, which would appear to me to be a violation of state law? Mr. Donovan's response, and please correct me if I'm wrong, was he considers that a topic that's unresolved, which is fine. I would urge the board, and I'm willing to do it myself, is to contact the Secretary of State and find out if the New Hampshire School Board Association has that limitation upon its funds for us to be a member of that organization, that our funds must be, I'll use the word encumbered, I don't know if that's the right word, but it needs to be in a separate account, not part of the general fund. And that would also apply to the School Administrators Association. So I ask that, the board don't support this motion, take it out, which would make my motion moot. But if the board is going to vote on this, I just want to point out that we do not have an assurance that we're in compliance with state law if we use our general funds to pay for it. That's why I'm supporting it.
Go ahead, Mr. Donovan.
Okay, I did a little more research this afternoon, and Section 15.5, it says, no recipient of a grant or appropriation of state funds may use the state funds to lobby or attempt to influence legislation, participate in political activity, or contribute funds to any entity engaged in these activities. So the way it's worded, it's really not all that clear to me. I don't consider the funds received from taxpayers of Nashua to be state funds. I consider them to be local funds. So do we receive state funds? We receive some grants that are state funds, but it's relatively small. We do receive the adequacy, about $34 million a year, which is a state tax. So I don't think 15.5 is all that clear, and maybe it's something The thing that I find difficult, these associations are throughout the whole state. And if it's illegal, then there's an awful lot of school districts breaking the law.
Right.
And it's never been brought up. So, but I'm not a lawyer. I don't have a definitive answer on this. I just have what I've pulled up.
Go ahead, Ms.
Pardon me.
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Mosher, then Ms. Hohensee.
In 12 years, I've never had that situation come up where they talked about the lobbying aspects of the School Boards Association, or whether it was legal or illegal. But in 12 years, if they haven't found it yet, and with all the districts that are using it in the state, I have sincere doubts that it would be illegal, because somebody in the legislature or somebody in the Senate or the governor or the Department of Justice or whatever would certainly have picked it up and cited people for it.
Thank you, Mr. Mosher. Ms. Hohensee.
Thank you. A couple years ago, someone in Merrimack brought this to the court, and the court did decide that the money for these associations, because they have a percentage that goes to lobbying at the state level, has to be physically separate in physically separate accounts. So if we have a general fund that has state education funds and local property tax for education conglomerate with everything else, and they're in the same account, that's not a physical separation. It has to be two separate physical bank accounts, not an accounting difference. And I don't know what the city does in terms of where they store the money, how many accounts they have, but it was an issue in Merrimack, and they were out of compliance, and they did rectify the situation when it was brought to their attention.
That was probably a Merrimack situation. And I can't see you or Howard or anybody else trying to twist this around to gain your own ends.
Excuse me, but I think that was uncalled for. A state law is a state law.
I think the points have been made, and we could debate this to death, I guess, unless anyone who hasn't spoken before on this motion would like to speak. I think we're ready for the vote. Okay, on the motion to remove $10,000 for New Hampshire School Board Association. Mrs. Oden?
No.
Ms. Raymond?
No.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
No.
Ms. Van Twyver?
No.
Mr. Greeno votes no. Ms. Hohensee?
Yes.
Ms. Timmons?
No.
Ms. Porter?
No.
I have 2 yeses and 7 noes. The motion fails. Mr. Kaufman?
Thank you. I move to allocate $1,500 from the School Board Association line to purchase up to 50 books on the school board budgeting best practices. And if I can get a second, I'd like to explain that.
Second.
Could you repeat that again?
I move to allocate $1,500 from the New Hampshire School Board Association line item of $10,000 to purchase up to 50 books of the school board budgeting best practices book.
Ms. Hohensee, you seconded it?
Yes, I did. And I might point out that the 10,000 in that line item, Mr. Donovan said, was probably a little higher than was needed. So there probably is 1,500 in there that could be moved without undermining the membership.
May I speak to my motion?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Ms. Hohensee. I was going to point that out. I think the School Board Association membership is about $7,500, so this would take about $1,500 of that and allocate it for purchasing a book. Board members, members of the public, there's copies over there prepared, I copied down. There's a best practices in school district budgeting. There's an organization called the Government Finance Officers Association. They've produced guidelines around best practices for school district budgeting. There's a description in front of the board. I've sent this out previously to the board. If the third page of the handout is actually a description of the book that I'm asking the board to purchase. It's a $30 non-member price. My reason for 50 books is, well, we have the whole board, we have the major administrators, probably the principals, directors. I think by the time after the board worked through its understanding and it was to be rolled out on a district-wide basis, we'd probably need about 50 books. I think from my experience on this board especially, I think we need better discipline when it comes to the budgeting process. I personally would like to know how much each program costs. I'd like to know what we spend on math. I'd like to know what we spend on English, just because I want to be able to understand cost per pupil in those areas, how the grades affect the spending, or how I should say it the other way around, how the spending improvements that we make, how does that improve grades? Everything I'm interested in is improving academic performance for our students. Budgeting would put, best practices would put a formal discipline that's been created by professionals and monitored by these folks, and I think it's a good idea for the district. The vote for this will be a great step in implementing best practices for budgeting in the school district. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Raymond?
Have you read this book, Mr. Kaufman?
I do not have a copy.
Okay. And then my other question was probably to Mr. Donovan. With the New Hampshire School Board Association, did that include professional development and any kind of educational opportunities for school board members?
Yes.
Yes, it does.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Does anybody know if that includes budgeting?
I can't speak to,
Go ahead, Dr. Mosley.
we had a presentation probably about 2 years ago. A representative came down and talked about the benefits of it. There is professional development. There's professional development for the board, ranging from policies coming out of Concord. So there's opportunities to talk about funding. I think the hot topic now is funding coming out of Concord and whether it's adequate or not. So they offer a wide array of opportunities for board members to gain professional development.
Thank you, Dr. Mosley. Ms. Van Twyver?
Yes, I have a question about the second sheet here. This looks like the normal sheet that we get every time we do a contract. And it's my understanding that is developed by the city. That's the way they want you to present the information. I don't know why this is included in here.
Pages got out of order when they were printed, I think. But I have another purpose for this that I hope to be able to discuss later. But it's the third page in the document that is a summary of the actual book that I'm asking the board to approve for purchase.
Does anyone else have any comments on this motion? Mr. Mosher?
Yes. I believe that there is another place in the budget that's a line item on publications that would be pertinent to the school and the administration of the school board. And I believe that would be the place to put that $1,500 for the book. That book may be good, but I think that put it in the line item for the School Boards Association would be a mistake.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mosher. Does anyone else have any comments or questions? Are we ready to vote? Go ahead, Mr. Kaufman.
Thank you. Well, for clarification, I'm taking the money out of the School Board Association to allocate it for this specific purpose. If you wanted to move it to the publications line and spend it out of that line, I would have no objection.
Okay. Ms. Van Twyver, and then Ms. Oden.
Well, actually, she was before me.
Oh, okay.
You didn't see her hand. Well, I don't think we need to buy 50. I think if we buy 9, then we can pass them around from year to year. I think it might be interesting just to have at least one copy of this document for the budget chairman. I think that would be a good idea.
Ms. Oden?
My feeling is we hire Mr. Donovan as our chief operating officer to prepare our budget. I don't think I've seen any large problems. I know at one point we had a $3 million shortfall, probably eight years ago. But I
Yes.
think he's done a good job with the budget. I did look up this group some, and they don't do their own budget. They have somebody else do it. So I'm not going to support this. Thank you.
Okay, so unless anyone who hasn't spoken before on the motion would like to speak, I think we're ready for the vote. On the motion to allocate $1,500 from the NHSBA line to purchase 50 books of school board budget best practice book.
Mr. Green?
Mr. Chair, I said up to 50.
Up to 50, okay. Purchase.
You could start out with one for each of the board
Okay.
members. That's
All
how
right.
it was intended.
Okay. Mrs. Oden?
No.
Ms. Raymond?
No.
Ms. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
No.
Ms. Van Twyver?
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes no. Ms. Hohensie?
Yes.
Ms. Timmons?
No.
Ms. Porter?
No.
I have 3 yeses and 6 noes. Motion fails. Ms. Raymond?
I have a question. I'm looking at our lovely chart that Mr. Donovan is doing for us. Thank you very much. And I see that on the 6th, there were added the psychologist and the paraprofessionals. That was before we accepted the 2.43. So are those still in there on top of the 2.43?
That's a very good question. You voted on that before you officially took the budget, but you did vote on it. So I put it up there, and then it's really up to the board. Do you want to vote on it again? Do you want to keep it? But it was voted on before, it was voted on based on a 2.92 budget prior to the public hearing. So it was just done out of turn, so to speak. But since it was voted on by the board 5-3, I wanted to at least have it up there.
Okay. And because it was voted on the board, in order to make a motion to change any of that, would we need someone who voted for it to make a motion for reconsideration, or could any member suggest that we start over?
I think that any member could make a motion to rescind
Okay.
the motion.
I would like to move to, at this time, take those out, and then we can discuss it further. So the how much is that together? 225.
Second.
I think only one was approved. The other one's sort of in limbo,
No,
if
no,
I
they were,
remember correctly.
the full 225 was approved.
Yes.
Yeah,
the full 220.
150.
Oh, it's considered one, okay,
No,
thank you.
I think it was one motion for both things.
Yes.
May I suggest that we leave it in and start talking about it? Because if you're going to put it back, someone's going to put it back.
That's
Well,
possible.
it is in, but her motion is to take it out, so it's,
Right,
so
and
what we have on the floor right now is a motion to take it out. We actually have on the floor a 2.43% budget with the 225,000 on top of that. That's what we've approved. That's what this board, this committee has approved.
Accepted.
Accepted. And what Ms. Raymond did was make a motion to rescind the 225,000 for the psychologists
Right. Can I speak to it?
Sure.
in the Paris.
Okay. To be clear, I am 110% in support of additional psychologists and paraprofessionals. I have a couple concerns with this particular motion and the way that it is laid out. having spoken to Ms. Bagley, if we add 5 paraprofessionals, we would also need to add someone else to supervise them, because we can't just have paraprofessionals without appropriate supervision. That's not fair to anybody. The other thing that I've become aware of is that we have two psychologist positions right now that are being filled by a rotating number of contractors, because we weren't able to fill them with full-time psychologists. And I can't help but wonder that if we had full-time people instead of rotating contractors, if that might take some of the burden off of the full-time psychologists that we have. If we could fill the 2 openings that we currently have, plus the 2 new interns, I wonder if that would be helpful. And then we could stay closer to what the mayor has asked, while also meeting some of the needs of our staff. So that's where I'm at.
Anybody have any more comments or questions on that motion? Mr. Mosher?
I needed to explain it to me again.
Okay, so there was a motion a couple of weeks ago to add 3 psychologists and 5 paraprofessionals for behavior, so behavior paraprofessionals, to the budget at a cost of $225,000. Now, I had quibbles at the time because I don't think you can get psychologists who have PhDs for $50,000 each. I just don't think that's a realistic number. Nonetheless, I'm opposed to adding it for 3 reasons. One, if we add 5 paraprofessionals, we would need to add staff to supervise them, or else they would be out there trying to do a very difficult job without adequate supervision and help. And then the psychologists, we have 2 open positions right now that are being filled with rotating contractors. And I can't help but wonder that if we were to actually have full-time people in those positions, that would help relieve some of the burden. I also would be concerned about adding 3 more positions when we have 2 that we weren't able to fill. Like it seems like it doesn't make sense to me. It's not logical. So I feel like we work to actually fill the 2 positions that we have during this next hiring season over the summer. We add the 2 interns that are in the budget, and then we see where we're at instead of going to this extreme of adding 3 more, not knowing if we can even find 3 people for that amount of money.
I agree.
So.
Okay. Does anybody else have any comments or questions? Ms. Porter?
Okay, Mrs. Bagley, if you can just help me. So are those positions, they're open because people left, or those are additional positions?
We currently have 2 open school psychology positions. One is...
We can't.
Oh, sorry. We have 2 open school psychologist positions. We do have a contractor filling the position of 1, and then the other position is being filled by rotating staff or contractor service. So one person did leave in, I think it was December, and the other position, somebody had accepted it and then found a different position. And we've continued to look. We do have a school psychology intern position always that's been in our budget for a long time. And we have 23 applicants for that one position already.
I'm sorry, for the intern or for the
For
psychologist?
the intern.
Intern.
So we're asking for 2 more interns, and historically we find that they're much easier to fill and find.
So is this okay then? I want to do the right thing, and you know better than I want to do the right thing by our kids, and within the constraints of the budget, and it's a very difficult thing to do, and I would feel better if you were comfortable with this.
I think Mrs. Raymond's motion, I think that we have the resources, given Mrs. Raymond's motion, we have the resources that we can meet the needs of our students. Of course, we never can plan for our unknowns, but I think we can be creative and meet the needs. We also understand that there's other needs throughout the district. Special ed is a huge part of the district, but we know it's not the only part.
Okay.
Well, the I'm sorry, can I
Go
follow
ahead,
up?
go ahead, Ms.
Because
Porter.
the school psychologists would work not only with the special ed population, though,
Correct, but the school psychologists are part of the special ed budget.
Okay, so these positions would fall under special ed.
That's correct.
So if we wanted psychologists to work with children who are not identified, it would have to come from it would be different?
Our school psychologists work with our entire population. The funding comes from special education.
Okay, okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Oden?
Yes. With what we have an elementary school that only has a psychologist 1 day a week. Would that change?
Our hope is yes. That's why we asked for the 2 additional school psychologist interns. We understand that that allocation is not fair given the population of the students there. So that is one of our priorities, is to provide more time at that school.
And what are you looking for time?
That'll-
Another day, a full day, enough time so that there could be counseling along with testing and evaluation?
Hopefully at least another full day, if not more.
Thank you.
And I have
Go ahead. You have
one
a
more
follow-up?
follow-up, I'm
Yep.
sorry.
Go ahead.
I know I worked at a school where we had a behavior para, and they were supervised, I believe, on the whole by the principal. They had PD. The case managers for special ed, would they supervise somebody on their staff that was a behavior para with the support of PD?
Teachers can't supervise paras. They can oversee their activities, but they can't provide the supervision, the observation, and the evaluation of paras. So it would fall under either the principal if they were assigned to a specific school, or it would fall onto my administrative team.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Porter?
How long is the term of the internship?
It's the entire school year.
So it goes 1 school year, so then it would be new interns the following year. And have we done that already? That were there
Yeah.
1 year at a time, and how is that working?
Our chief school psychologist was an intern.
I know. I worked with her when she was. and
We've had great success with our interns. Many of our school psychologists now were interns with us previously. They do a really nice job working with our students and providing the need.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any more questions or comments on this motion? In that case, I think we're ready to vote. Do you have a? Okay. On the motion to rescind $225,000 for 3 psychologists and 5 paraprofessionals, a yes vote rescinds, a no vote does not. Mrs. Oden?
Say that again?
Move to rescind $225,000 for 3 psychologists and 5 paraprofessionals.
And you said a no vote?
No, a no vote, a yes vote means that we're taking it out. Yes vote
Okay.
means we're taking it out.
That's
No
what I
vote
thought.
means no, we're not.
Okay, thank you. No.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
No.
Ms. Van Twyver?
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. Ms. Hohensie?
Yes.
Ms. Timmons?
Yes.
Ms. Porter?
I'm going to say yes with reservations, but
Okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 yeses and 2 nos. The motion carries.
So now we're back to 2.43.
Ms. Hohensie?
I'd like to move that we charge tuition for the full-day kindergarten at a rate of $200 a month. And if I get a second, I'd like to speak to it.
Second.
This, you would get a half day without cost, but if you want the full day, that incremental, we would charge $200 a month for those parents who are not on free and reduced lunch for their student. So I'm assuming that would be half the population. That would give us, my estimation, close to $800,000, which we could put to ELLs or other uses. As I see it, kindergarten is not a mandatory year. The other grades are, and if we want excellent education for them, we shouldn't be saying, well, in 2 or 3 years, you'll get the rest of the ELLs, you get the other things that you need. I think we charge for busing, we charge for athletics, and we should charge for kindergarten. And by comparison, I know Merrimack was charging for their second half day. They actually contracted with the Nashua Adult Learning Center. I think they charged about $200 a year or two ago just to do that second half. I know Derry charges $360 a month. Atkinson and Timberlane charge $450 a month. Bedford charges $500 a month. So this isn't the high end. And if you take $200 a month, there's more than 20 school days in a month. What is that, $10 a day? It's not a lot of money, but it will add up, and it will be able to help this board find the funds to provide the ELLs and those other positions that we say that we absolutely need to give an excellent education. Otherwise, you've got, you're warehousing those kids from 1st to 8th grade and saying, well, in a couple years, you'll get the services you need. But right now, everything's sort of tight, and you'll just have to do without. So I think this is an opportunity for us to not charge a lot of money, but to, do what we do for busing, athletics, and other things. Also on the horizon, there was a bill that just passed almost unanimously out of committee that would require us to bus our kindergarten students, which we do not do now. So now we have another cost for kindergarten. When this came in 2 years ago, it was supposed to be budget neutral. Then we found out we needed supplies, we needed some paras, we need this. It's not budget neutral. And if you add up all the teachers that are invested in this, it's quite a substantial sum. So I don't think it's unreasonable that we ask for a little bit of money. Our pre-K, if you're not special needs, I believe we charge those parents. So anybody that's on free and reduced lunch, we wouldn't ask them. But those that can afford it, this is still much, much cheaper than any private kindergarten they could find on the open market. So I don't think it's unreasonable. And I think this is allowing us to service our 10,000 other students that are in the system that are mandatorily here, and some of those need some services, as we keep talking about, and they need it now. They don't need it 2 or 3 years as we phase those services in or back in.
Thank you. I thought Ms. Timmons and then Ms. Raymond.
Okay, thank you. I cannot support that. I will not put that burden on any family, free or reduced or otherwise. I had a couple of kids going into kindergarten next year, and their parents would be appalled if I say, now you got to pay. Full-time kindergarten is just that, 4-day kindergarten. Keno is supposed to supplement some of the costs of the 4-day kindergarten. I will not support adding any type of money burden on any family regardless. I can't support that.
By the way, Keno is being reversed.
Ms. Raymond?
Thank you. I was not aware that other districts were charging to have full-day kindergarten. So this is surprising news to me, and I'm struggling with it because for me, the whole idea of public education is that it's free to everyone. And I'm glad you mentioned the bill that just came out of committee because it immediately sprung to mind when you were talking about this. We may have to end up transporting our kindergartners, but when I read it, I was thinking that kindergarten might then become mandatory as first grade is. So I think I have to look at that bill a little bit better before I understand what the bill is saying.
It's just busing. It's not anything else.
It's not mandating kindergarten. So that's interesting. But I'm really struggling with this idea of making people pay for public school. That's kind of contrary to the point of public school.
Ms. Van Twyver?
I wanted to mention that the mayor on the radio program the other day said that Keno was bringing $800,000 into the city, and I don't know how that applies to us, whether we get it or not. So Mr. Donovan might be able to share some light on it.
Well, the Keno it's a revenue from the state, so it goes in with the other revenues. And although we have received Keno revenue, We've also had reductions in other revenues from the state. The adequacy aid, for example, was less. So basically, the way I look at the revenues, which basically everyone says it goes to the city. It doesn't. In reality, you build up all your operating budgets. That creates a cost. Your revenues come in, which reduces that cost number, and then you take that number and you use that to tax the property owners. So it's done in a group citywide, but it's not exactly like the cities keep.
But it doesn't come to us directly.
No.
And it's not like the mayor can just give us $800,000 and say, oh, this is yours. I mean, like you said, it's built into the tax structure.
It's all part of the mathematical formula, so to speak, of creating a tax rate.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Mosher, do you have any comments on this motion?
Oh, yes.
Go ahead, sir.
Pardon my French, but all of the areas that was mentioned as charging, they're all affluent. And especially Bedford. Bedford is one of the richest places in the state. So, of course, they can charge whatever they want for kindergarten, and be all right. But I think that, depends on what they're feeding the kids for lunches there, but I know it's probably not filet mignon, but that's a very affluent area, Bedford. And to think that we could do that over here, I don't think so, because we have some people that may have a good income, but it's not a lot. And especially people that have young children of kindergarten age, I don't think that they have the money that they can just lay out here and there and get tapped for something else, because they're already paying a good property tax. They're also paying some other things. They got small kids, they got shots, they got pediatricians, they got a whole bunch of things. And to put an extra charge on them, I don't think that's a good idea. So maybe some other time, when Nashua is turned into a rich man's paradise, maybe then, but not now.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Van Twyver?
Can I have clarification on the motion? Is it that the free and no-cost lunch people don't have to pay the 200? Was that the intent? Well,
Correct.
that sounds pretty good to me. And how many free and no-cost kindergarten teachers, students do we have?
I assume we had 43% in the district, but I just took half. I figure we have roughly 800 students, so I just figured that half of them would pay, half of them wouldn't. So this is erring on the low side. There might be more if we pass it. I'm being conservative.
Thank you.
Mr. Kaufman?
Thanks. I want to thank Ms. Holensey for applying some of her math skills to a funding problem that we have. The other thing I would like to comment is allowing parents who use the kindergarten for the second half of the day will also help the seniors. The mayor expressed concern that he wanted us, the aldermen, those of us who are spending money, to be mindful of the taxpayers and their ability to pay. There are lots and lots of people in Nashua, senior citizens on retired incomes. And something like this, we pay for I'm one of them. We pay for the infrastructure, the salaries and everything for schools. At least this would be a gesture to the senior community that we're mindful of them and people who are using a service or paying for a service. So I will be voting for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Van Twyver?
I have one more comment, too. Those people who can afford, or the 50% that Ms. Hohensie was talking about, if they didn't have this afternoon session, they would have to put the children in some kind of care. They'd just be moving funds from some daycare to the school district. I'm going to vote for it. I think it's a good idea.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? Ms. Raymond and then Ms. Timmons?
Thank you. I don't know that that's an accurate analysis. I mean, I can only speak to my experience and the experience of other parents that I know who are working. But my kids only had half-day kindergarten. We missed the cutoff. But I had to pay for the week daycare either way. Like it didn't, whether they were getting out a half day or a whole day, my rate for daycare would have been the same because I had a 9 to 5 job, 8 to 4 job, which is not the hours of school. So when my children were in kindergarten, I had to drop them off at daycare in the morning, and so they were at daycare for a couple hours. Then they went to kindergarten for a few hours. Then they went back to daycare for the rest of the day. And I know many parents in that boat now where their kids go to daycare before kindergarten, they stay the whole day of kindergarten, and then they go to daycare after kindergarten. And for me personally, and I can't speak for every daycare program, the cost of the before and after care was the same as the cost as if they had been there all day. You don't get a discount for losing 3 hours in the middle. And in fact, you are grateful that you find a daycare that will drive your child to kindergarten.
I was going to ask you about that, how the kids got to kindergarten.
For my family, if just using mine as an example, if we wanted full-day kindergarten, which I would support because there's a lot of evidence that it's good for kids and it's pretty much standard nationwide except for here, that would just add $200 to our monthly budget. There would be no change in my daycare costs. It would just cost me $200 extra that I wasn't expecting, which is what it is. And I don't discount the idea of bringing in revenue. I think that's great, bringing in revenue. I just don't know that this is the appropriate time to think about it. We have a budget that's not making any cuts. We're not in any extreme financial hardship here. I think if we were talking about a budget where we had to cut positions, then we would look at other sources of revenue, but I don't see that it's a dire need for this year without further research.
Ms. Timmons, you had your hand up?
Yes, I believe this is a kind of a sneaky way to go back to half-day. We have full-day kindergarten, and we have instructors for a 4-day. We do not have half-day kindergarten right now, and to go back to a half-day because parents can't afford the 4-day is absurd. I think we need to support 4-day kindergarten as is. We are restructured to do so, and we need to continue that.
Thank you. Before we vote on this, I just want to say a few brief words. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ms. Porter. You haven't spoken on the motion yet.
Okay, as far as, I'm a retired person, and I pay taxes, and I'm happy to pay taxes to support public education, because I know that even though I don't have children currently in school, our society is built on a healthy public education system, of which kindergarten is a part. So I do not believe that. I applaud you're looking for ways to raise revenue, but I can't go along with this way. I'm happy to pay taxes. That doesn't mean I want to have them raised all the time, but I understand when I call, I want a police officer there, I want all our kids educated, and it's my responsibility to pay taxes, and I do that happily and willingly.
Thank you. Yeah, I believe this is a bad idea. I think it penalizes families with children. And public education is public education. We shouldn't be charging extra dollars. $200 a month, that's $2,000 a year. If you have, that's a big chunk out of a family's income per year. Doesn't matter if they're getting reduced lunches or not. That's a big chunk. I remember paying, as Ms. Raymond said, you still have families, even though their kids go full-day kindergarten, even though their kids go first grade, second grade, et cetera, you still have after-school daycare. We had it when my kids were growing up, so it's still, this is just another hit off of the working family's budget. I'm not going to support it. So, go ahead, Ms. Hohensee, quickly, please.
I have a
I'd like to
question for
take the
Mr.
vote.
Donovan. If that bill passes 713, and we have to transport 800 kindergarten students, what would that cost us roughly? I thought it was like $49,000, $49,000 per, 50,000 a bus? How many kids can you fit on a bus? What would the cost be?
Well, a bus is about, it's close to 60,000 now, but it depends on the route. You know, if you add 8 kindergarten kids to a certain route, there might not need to add a bus at all. I don't know, but if you assumed, I don't know, 2 or 3 buses, multiply 60 by 2 or 3, and there's your answer.
So probably around $200,000 more. We could be hit with that.
Possibly.
Okay, thank you.
So I think go ahead, Ms. Oden.
No, I just think it's something we have already offered to our families. I think kindergarten is critical to a student's education. I say that coming from a primary school background. I see the value of it, and to start charging for that, I just don't think that's what public education was about. And also with the busing, I know out in Milford, the kindergarten, I don't think they charge for busing. They do have full-day kindergarten this year, and they bus the students and they ride along with other elementary students. So I don't think you just need kindergarten buses. I don't think it would be, you'd have to have buses for 800 students. I think there probably would be room on a lot of elementary school buses. Thank you.
Okay. I think we're just about ready for the vote. So the motion is to charge tuition for full-day kindergarten, $200 per month, except students eligible for free and reduced lunches. Mrs. Oden?
No.
Ms. Raymond?
No.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
No.
Ms. Van Twyver?
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes no. Ms. Hohensie?
Yes.
Ms. Timmons?
Definitely not.
Ms. Porter?
No.
Okay, I have 3 yeses and 6 nos. The motion fails. Mr. Kaufman?
Thank you. May I ask Mr. Donovan a question which would yield to produce a motion? Thanks, Mr. Donovan. So in one of the questions I sent you the other day, I asked about the furniture. I asked you a question. Oh, okay. It was about the teacher ease and where that money came from in the current budget and next year's budget. And this is strictly from memory, having read it once. If I recall, what you said was the furniture allocation that we had in the budget for the current year was redirected to go to paying for the teacher ease, if I'm not mistaken. Or was that about 17 of the 35? I don't remember the numbers, but I remember that premise.
Yes, the teacher ease was not in the fiscal year 19 budget as a specific software item. What happened in fiscal year 19 is Dr. McKinney was new to the position. So when the budget was put together for curriculum, he had only been in that position for 2 or 3 months by the time we're putting the budget together. So what we did was we said, he's like, well, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do at this point. I've been in the job for 3 months. So we took the previous year's budget, plugged that into fiscal year 19. So the fiscal year 19 budget was really just a copy of fiscal year 18. As he became more comfortable and familiar with things and decided whatever process was used to come up with teacher ease, we simply then took money that was in the furniture line and moved it up to the software line to cover the cost of teacher ease for this year.
And I understand that. So thank you. So I was pretty close.
Yep.
So when I looked at the budget the other day, I did not see any money allocated to furniture. And yet we didn't spend what we had anticipated. The cost was deferred to teacher ease. If I'm not mistaken, there's no dedicated funds in the budget right now for furniture specifically. And I don't know if that's cross-district, the district furniture or just high schools. I know we had a need last year in the high schools. Our student members highlighted the chairs, they're 15 years old or whatever.
There's money in the budget for furniture. There's not money in the curriculum budget for furniture. The fiscal year 18 budget had more furniture than typical because of the kindergarten. Okay?
Okay.
So typically, you will not see a significant sum in the curriculum budget for furniture. They don't have high furniture needs.
Okay, so my concern about furniture, it's not in the curriculum budget. How much do we have allocated elsewhere?
There's 151,000 in the total school budget.
Do you have any idea how much of that might be spent in the high school?
I could look it up. You'd have to give me a minute or so.
Just even off the cuff would be
No, I don't
20,
know. Off the-
30%?
I don't know. I can look it up. But
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Van Twyver?
Thank you. Mr. Donovan, do you remember George who came and demonstrated the chairs at one of our board meetings many years ago?
the student rep,
The
George?
student, yes,
I
our
do.
student rep.
Yes.
Didn't we allocate money for chairs?
We have purchased chairs over the last few years. But the chairs, I guess, have been breaking. The original chairs purchased at high school probably been breaking at a faster rate than expected. The other thing that happened, the last 2 years, we had that counselor position that wasn't budgeted correctly. And so the high schools were paying $25,000 each for the counselor. In the fiscal year 20 budget, they don't have to pay for that anymore. We've paid with another allocation to cover that counselor. So in fiscal year 20, they will both have $25,000 that they didn't have this year and they didn't have the previous year. So I would suggest strongly to the principals of the high school, they use a bunch of that to buy chairs. But
We had also had, I remember as chairman of the Finance and Operations Committee, there was money that was transferred for chairs also in the high school. So it's not something that's been neglected. They have been looking at that and trying to fill the needs as the needs come up. Because I remember that we did transfer money for chairs during last year at the Finance
yes,
and
we've
Operations Committee
had,
meeting.
the last 2 years, we
Yep.
have found money somewhere and they bought some chairs. Do they need more?
Yeah.
They probably do. I haven't walked around looking at the chairs, but I've heard that they would love to get a little more money for chairs, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. Mr. Kaufman?
Thank you. Move to require on the original sheet regarding the ELL teachers, move to require that the $200 in the contingency fund for the ELL teachers be limited to ELL teachers or an American Sign Language teacher, and/or an American Sign Language. Out of the
200,000. Yeah, not $200.
Oh, sorry, 200, yes, 200,000. So move to require that the $200,000 in the contingency fund be allocated to either ELL teachers, a combination of 3 ELLs or 1 ASL, or 4 ELL teachers.
Second.
No, it's even, it's just allocation. And if I can speak to that?
So could you please repeat what you wanted to limit that to? There were 4 LL teachers, and what'd you say?
It's either 4 ELL teachers or 3 ELLs and American Sign Language teacher.
Oh, okay, or 3 ELLs and 1 American Sign Language, okay.
Did I get that position right, Ms. Raymond?
I'm not sure. Ms.
ASL.
Bagley?
It's an ASL interpreter.
Okay.
not
Interpreter,
teacher.
thank you.
Ms. Bagley, did you have something to say? No?
No, I was just clarifying. It's an American Sign Language interpreter, not a
Okay.
teacher.
Okay,
And if I may speak to that?
go ahead.
I've been on the board several years. Every year, Mr. Chopa comes through. I need help, I need help, I need help. This year, we seem to have funds available. Thanks to the mayor for helping us out with the contingency. And I would like to serve the needs of our ELL students. And I can appreciate the need for the American Sign Language interpreter. That helps us, again, potential for improving revenue to the district and serving local needs. So that's why I made the motion that I did. I want to make sure that the positions are targeted to specific needs and not put in a bucket that can be reallocated. Thank you.
Does anyone else want to speak on this? Mr. Mosher?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, but I think that we should watch out because when you take something and you're dedicating a certain amount of money to a particular thing, that's good. But however, over the course of the year, we may have another contingency that may arise, and we may look at that and say, well, gee, wouldn't it be nice if we could tap that fund for a few $1,000s for maybe chairs or blackboards or a projector or some other thing that we find that we desperately need. But yet, if the money is tied up because it's only going to be allocated for the things that we put it for, and it leaves it so that it can't be used for anything else. And I know my household budget that I have a contingency that came up, and it cost me $900, which I really could not afford. But I had to move it from a dedicated fund that I had for something else to pay for the repair in the house. So I'd say, it's a good idea, but you have to be very careful about it. When you are dedicating it to only a few things. So, we can use the money for one thing or with a couple of things, but then we have to leave it open-ended so that if there's something else that comes up and we have to hire another psychologist or another teacher or whatever, that the money is there that we can attach.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mosher. Ms. Hohensie?
Thank you. I just wanted to reassure Mr. Mosher that we can just simply take a vote of the board and change the allocation. But I think the motion was the intention at this point in time for the board to dedicate it to ELLs and perhaps a sign language interpreter is the purpose of the motion. If something changes, the board can simply just vote to change some of the allocation. So I don't think anything's in stone.
Ms. Van Twyver and then Mr. Kaufman?
I believe the mayor said this was a contingency for ELL. Right. That he was going to give us this money for ELL. This, Mr. Mosher, does not require any money, what Mr. Kaufman's motion is. He's just wanting to add the interpreters that could be used for either the ELL teachers or the ASL interpreter. So there's no money involved in his motion, and I think it's a good idea to make sure that Mr. Chopa, thank you, gets what he's been asking for, and he has been asking for years.
Go ahead, Mr. Kaufman.
Thank you. Yes, the mayor was clear that this money had to be spent on ELL. But I'm concerned, as I said to the mayor, of Mr. Alderman Dowd's comment that it could be used for a variety of positions. And I'm just trying to make sure that it goes. The discussion here has largely been about ELL, and I'm sensitive to the sign language interpreter position. I'm just trying to make sure that it's not going to be used for anything else, that it's going to go where we intend it to go, which is what the primary discussion has been, which is the ELL teachers and my little, accommodation for the interpreter. Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else? Mrs. Oden?
My understanding, we got the proposed budget from the superintendent that he intended to add 4 ELL teachers. They had asked for 9, but he made some progress in making 4. And I thought I heard the interpreter was going to come out of the IDEA. Oh, that was sign language. Duh.
So because the American Sign Language interpreter was not included in this, we have come up with a contingency plan for using our IDA funds if we need to.
So administration has already dealt with that.
We haven't allocated the funds yet,
Right.
but we do have a plan.
You have a plan for that. That's what I thought. Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr.
Okay.
Mr. Guarino.
Go ahead, Mr. Kaufman.
In light of that, I would just limit this expense to 4 ELL teachers. If I can amend my motion, or,
I guess you could, friendly amendment, sure, you can
yeah,
amend
so.
the motion. So you
just,
want to
yeah,
allocate
the $200,000 to 4
4 ELL
ELL
teachers.
and that would be it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments on this motion? Okay, I'm going to read the motion. It's to require the $200,000 in contingency fund be allocated to 4 ELL teachers. Mrs. Oden?
No.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
Okay, yes.
Okay, Ms. Van Twyver?
Yes?
Mr. Guarino votes yes. Ms. Hohensie?
Yes.
Ms. Timmons?
Yes.
Ms. Porter?
Yes.
We have 1 no and 8 yeses. Motion carries. Does anyone else have any comments or questions on the budget? We have, Ms. Raymond?
I'd like to move that we approve the budget as it stands now and send it on to the full board for approval and moving it to the alderman.
Second.
So could you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
I think my phrasing was not great. I move that we approve the budget as it now stands, which is 2.25 plus,
Oh, no, 243.
it's
243.
2.25 plus the $200,000 contingency
$200,000
for
contingency.
ELL, bringing it to 2.43.
Right.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay.
I think we should lay it on the table so we can pick it up next week.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I didn't have a
and that was-
second, so,
So Ms. Timmons seconded it, so
oh,
we have,
okay.
Move to approve budget as it stands at 2.25 at 200,000 for ELL to 2.43 to the full board for approval?
Yes.
To the full
You should
board.
probably put the dollar amount in, the budget,
And for a-
112.
Yep, for a total cost of $112,015,068.
Okay, that's $112,015.68?
No, 112 million.
112 million, I'm sorry. 112 million, $15,680.
$68.
$68.
It's on the
Yeah,
screen,
Okay.
outlined in green.
Oh, there it is, okay. 112,015.68, 112,015.068, okay.
So to
And
speak,
it was seconded by Ms. Timmons, right?
so to speak to that, I just
Sure.
noticed that no one was making any other motions, so I thought didn't think people had more motions.
It's quite all right. They didn't
Go ahead,
speak up.
Ms. Van Twyver.
I just want clarification that this motion does not include the psychologists. Would you move that down a bit, please? The psychologists, and you rescinded motion number 1.
Yes.
So that means we will not be putting in the $150,000 or the $75,000.
Yes,
Okay, I just want to make that clear.
Yep, because there are, there's one behavior para included, that'll be added this year under what we've gotten here. and there
I just want to
are
make
two
it
psych
clear that
interns.
those two are not in that 2.43.
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes, for clarification, it's the document that Mr. Donovan gave to us earlier. The only change is the, I'll just use the word dedication of the $200,000 contingencies to ELL. Otherwise, it's the same. There are no changes beyond that. I think that's a fair statement.
All right.
Are there any other questions or on this? Anyone else want to weigh in on this motion?
I think Mr. Mosher had moved to table it instead.
Did you move to table it, Mr. Mosher?
Oh, you didn't.
That's the usual procedure, is that we have accepted the superintendent's budget. We have worked on it, and now what we have to do is lay it on a table, and then next budget meeting, we can work on it again. We take it off the table, we work on it, and put it back on the table. This is the
Mr.
way
Guarino,
It's
Mr. Mosher?
This is the way we have done it historically.
No, it's
Go
not.
No,
ahead.
it is not.
No, it's not.
Okay.
Well,
Don't tell me it is not. I've been on this board for 12 years.
I think, go ahead, Ms. Raymond.
I was just going to say, I think if there were more motions to be made and there was more work that people wanted to do, then certainly
And
we
that-
should put it on the table and
Right.
pick it back up next week. But I was under the impression by the deafening silence when you asked for if there was anything else, that we were done.
You're correct. You're done.
Okay. We appear to be done.
Traditionally, we put it on the table between budget meetings when we're amending it. When we're done, we pass it as a committee, and then we send the recommendation to the full board where we vote again.
Okay.
Right.
the
And
same thing.
that is where we stand
Absolutely.
right now.
Okay.
So unless, go ahead, Dr. Mosley.
I have a procedural question, just kind of listening to Ms. Raymond. So there was no more motions made.
Correct.
So are we saying we're going to, if there's no more motions made, then the budget doesn't need to be modified or tweaked with any more motions? That's my first assumption. And then if that is the case, why can't the budget just go to the full board on Monday?
That's
what, that was my motion.
That was the motion. Yep.
Oh, my goodness.
Thank you.
It can go tonight. You can
Or
call
we
another
can call
meeting.
a
It's
meeting
the same
tonight.
group of people.
But it wasn't
Wasn't
posted.
noticed.
No, come on. We've done this
Okay,
before.
Mrs. Oden,
Done
do
this
you want?
before.
Mrs. Oden has the floor.
Yes, I just wanted to say, I'm not going to support this. I understand some of the issues in the city, but I have said from the beginning, I think we have to address our needs. I think there are needs that are not addressed, so I will not support this.
Is there anyone else who wants to speak on the motion? Ms. Van Twyver?
I will fully endorse this budget. I don't think we can ask the mayor for any more money. He has already given us $200,000 for the ELL, and I'm sure, and the grant writer. So I'm sure that that will not be forthcoming. So this is the budget we need to give to him.
Ms. Hohensie?
Thank you. I think if we wanted more money, we could have charged something for kindergarten, whether it's 200, 100. We could have gotten more money and then addressed those needs. So I think if there was urgent needs, which many on this board feel that there is, we should have been responsible and tried to address those. But since we were unwilling to do that, I'm going to support this as the best budget we can get, given the money that the mayor gave us.
Dr. Mosley?
There is, if you check your agenda, Ms. Kinsella did put a special BOE meeting following this meeting in case you wanted to support the budget or vote it down, whatever you choose. So you can take the vote. You can adjourn this meeting, then call a special BOE, and then vote it.
We've
Right.
done that.
We've done that, yeah.
Can do that. So are there any more questions or comments on this motion? Because I'm going, if the committee is ready, I'm going to take a vote on the motion to approve the budget as it stands at 2.25% plus 200,000 for ELL to 2.43 to full board for approval at $112,015,068. Mrs. Oden?
No.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
No.
Ms. Van Twyver?
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. Ms. Hohensie?
Yes.
Ms. Timmons?
Yes.
Ms. Porter?
Yes.
I have 2 noes and 7 yeses. The motion carries.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Okay. On the motion to adjourn, Ms. Oden?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Ms. DeKoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher? Mr. Mosher? Ms. Van Twyver?
Yes, to adjourn?
Yes. Mr. Guarino votes yes. Ms. Hohensie?
Yes.
Ms. Timmons?
Yes.
Ms. Porter?
Yes.
We are adjourned at 8:20 PM. Thank you very much. I want to thank everyone. And Mr. Mosher has already hung up, but,
He's already tucked himself into bed.
okay, so it's going to be up to, us if we want to stay for the meeting and re-adjourn.
We'll
So-
make a call.
I'm just trying to call
Literally make the call.
Mr. Moser back on. If someone else is better than me at this, that would be great. Okay.
I don't need them. You do it without 'em.
Mr. Guarino, you're welcome to try.
It's gone to the full board now.
Yeah. So,
Are you, Ms. Raymond, are you going to convene a meeting, or are we to leave?
Be going home.
No, she's going to.
yes,
Just put it on the agenda for Monday night's board meeting. I asked a question of the president.
yes, I'm
Is
going
she
to convene a full board
convene?
meeting.
Okay,
Here, I'm going to use my cut to click.
that works.
All right, it is 8:22 PM on Wednesday, March 20th, and I am calling a meeting of the Nashua Board of Education to order. Mr. Guarino, could you please call the roll? Oh, good. It's
Okay, Mrs. Oden?
here.
Ms. Raymond?
Here.
Mr. Kaufman?
Here.
Mr. Mosher, we're trying to get him. Ms. Van Twyver?
Present.
Mr. Guarino is here. Ms. Hohensie?
Here.
Ms. Timmons?
Here.
Ms. Porter?
Here.
Okay, and we also have Dr. Mosley, Dr. McKinney, and Ms. Bagley, and Mr. Donovan is here also.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Guarino. So the only item on our agenda is regarding the budget. The Budget Committee has approved a 2.43 budget of $112,015,068, which includes a $200,000 contingency for 4 ELL teachers. Ms. Van Twyver?
Madam President, I move to accept the budget that came from the Budget Committee tonight with all those figures in it and have it sent on to the mayor.
Thank you.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Hohensie. Okay. Are you ready for the roll, Madam
Yes.
President?
Roll call, even though Mr. Mosier's not on, I think it would be appropriate.
Yes, I think a roll call is appropriate. Seeing no one seems to want discussion, let's
Okay.
do it.
On the motion to approve the budget from the Budget Committee, Mrs. Oden?
I think we may want to be more specific with the
Okay.
motion. It is the
Okay.
budget for next year.
Okay, on the motion to approve the budget at 2.25% plus the 200,000 for the ELL to 2.43 at $112,015,068. Ms. Oden votes no.
Excuse me, I think we should include the word contingency, the
Okay, I think-
$200,000 contingency.
I think what Ms. Van Twyver had said was that she wanted to approve a 2.43 budget
Okay.
of $112,015,068, which includes a contingency of $200,000 for the ELL teachers.
Well done, Ms. Raymond.
which was so much nicer than the first time.
Okay.
Okay, Mrs. Oden voted no.
No.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher is not here. Ms. Van Twyver?
Yes, indeed.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. Ms. Hohensie?
Yes.
Ms. Timmons?
Yes.
Ms. Porter?
Yes.
Motion carries. I have 7 yeses and 1 no.
Move to adjourn?
Okay. On the motion to adjourn, Mrs. Oden,
We can do a voice vote.
do a voice vote?
Excellent.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, we are adjourned at 8:25 PM.